Serious, Redditors who knew murderers before they committed their crimes. What were they like? What was your experience with them? Had a good friend that shot his mother 7 times, threw her body on a pile of branches and set it on fire, then called the police to come pick him up. When I knew him, he could be your best friend. Or if he felt slighted by you, your worst enemy. Literally could be the sweetest human or an absolute tyrant. Our grandparents lived next door and one day he came around looking for me, though I was at work, and he wound up spending 2 hours helping my grandparents move furniture. Another time hanging out with friends, he showed up covered in blood crying because he thought he might have killed someone at an earlier party. You just never knew what you'd get with him. Near the end though, he was slipping further into mental illness from everything I heard from friends. I had joined the army so I was gone, but my sister still was friends with him. The week before he killed his mother, he went to the police department complaining that he was getting messages from his computer to kill her. Edit. I confused a major point. When he went to police, he complained that his mother was trying to poison him. He did believe that he was receiving messages from his computer to kill her, but I can't say if he told police that initially. This happened 12 years ago, so my memory was off. Either way, he was found not guilty by reason of insanity and committed suicide while still in a mental institution last year. Knew him in high school. We were never friends, but we hung out in the same crowds and we were friendly with each other. He seemed a little on the dumb side ahead, pretty laid back and go with the flow. Saw him in the papers like 15 years later for suffocating his newborn. Quick escalation there. Dang. My stepmother hired her 17-year-old son, my stepbrother, to kill the boyfriend of my step-grandmother. The son was a troubled kid. Lots of trouble throughout his teenage years. I never really thought about it because my older blood brother also got in a lot of trouble growing up. The stepmother was actually really nice to me. Seemed like a normal person. I remember I still didn't really like her very much. Thinking about it, I never really knew why. My dad has a history of drugs, alcohol, and met my stepmom in NA meetings. They were successful rehabs that sponsored new NA members and were very active in their community. The stepmom ran the youth center on her own dime. My dad always told us that he would never marry again after my mum, but decided to during the trial. You can't force spouses to testify against other spouses in Canada. It's suspicious. I watched a HD crime documentary on the case 7 years ago with my dad the day it aired. Watched him cry for the first time in my life and kept saying how bullshit some of the evidence was. Made me think he really does believe she was innocent. They even said on the show that the only concrete evidence they had that she paid her son to murder was the son's confession. Her son took a deal and was out in 7 years. She got first degree. The trial took many years, and the sentence did not allow for the time spent in trial to count for time served. She has like 14-17 years left, and my dad and her are in their late 60s now. She most likely will die in jail. I don't know what to say to this except, I'm sorry. My tiny town has had 3 murders in the past 25 years and I rode the school bus with our newest murderer, and my grandma lived next door to the murderer before that. The newest murderer was a kinda weird but not creepy kid who didn't really understand boundaries and talked about masturbation pretty often. He got suspended from school when he was 16 for getting caught masturbating at school and then again getting into a fight, and so he moved to the school in the next town over. Time goes by and when he was like 19 he killed his dad on Thanksgiving Day by shooting him in the back of the head with a shotgun and then drove around with his dad's body tied to the pickup truck for a while. He eventually went to see his mom and grandma with the body in the back of the pickup truck covered with a tarp. When his dad didn't show up for Thanksgiving lunch or dinner, they called the cops and they found the body and the son confessed. I won't give any details, but that sounds disturbingly like one that went down in my hometown. Same kind of guy, same kind of murder, same holiday. Wasn't recent though. I knew a guy who burnt down a house trying to kill a rival drug dealer. The drug dealer got away, but his entire family, including 3 children, as well as his girlfriend, were killed in the fire. The guy was a real piece of crap. He was dating a friend of mine's younger sister and I kept trying to tell her he was bad news. After he was arrested she said, "I know he didn't do it. He's the nicest person in the world." I responded, "He has a freaking swastika tattooed on his chest." Edit. Crap. 3 children. A kid in elementary school He had the weirdest raspiest voice. He was nice but always talked about how he had staples in his head and all this stuff a 4th grader should not know about. He would also disappear for weeks at a time, like just not come into school. About 10 years later, while I was in college, I saw him on a Google News feed. Apparently him and his brother had beaten their father to death with a hammer. Couldn't find the article cause apparently kids beating parents to death is a pretty common thing. Sounds like they were abused. Went to school with a guy who murdered his dad's girlfriend and her 5 years and 7 years old daughters in an absolutely horrific way. He always had a temper issue growing up. He would get really angry, explosively angry even at a younger age. I thought he was nuts and was proven correct when he killed 4 people including 2 innocent little girls over getting mad at his father for not letting him borrow his truck to go to the movies. We rode the bus together and in like 7th grade he got mad at me and told me he would kill my entire family. I have known 2. One was my dad's close friend. I always liked him. He was a very kind man and always the first to help someone in need. He was also always a very strange dude. One day he shot someone to death he didn't like and covered up the crime for years. The second one was my brother's ex-boyfriend. They had an extremely violent and vindictive relationship. After they split, the ex found someone new to abuse and ended up stabbing him. I'm glad that it wasn't your brother who got stabbed. A few years ago, I attended a series of personal growth seminars and was paired up with a partner for certain assignments. He was definitely a troubled kid, much younger than the rest of the seminar participants, and I got the feeling his parents had signed him up to try to help him get his life back on track. I could tell he resented having to do the work involved, and at times he seemed angry about the ways his parents tried to control him. A few months ago, he attacked his parents and brother in a brutally violent way. His mom died, the other survived. I'd like to say it came as a complete surprise, but it really didn't. Sounds eerily like what happened with Doublelift. At that time, he had been investigated for the murder, thoroughly, but nothing came of it. So I guess this was technically after the murder, but no one knew. Everyone thought he was innocent at this point. He was a friend of my husband's family and was at our wedding. Went to church with us. Met our kid. We went out to meals with us. He seemed very normal. He was friendly and well spoken. My father-in-law told me he didn't believe it and that if this guy actually had done it that he would never be caught. Fast forward 8 years. He gets arrested and charged after an anonymous tip. Turns out he had forced his son to help him dispose of the body under threat and the son had finally came forward and provided evidence. I went to elementary school with a guy who ended up killing members of his wife's family. In school, he was often loud and acted out. His family was affiliated with the big local gang, and the kid talked a lot about guns and things of that nature. He was kind of funny at times, and never mean or a bully in my experience, just someone who talked about violence. My family was pretty neglectful and I almost never had a lunch, and I remember him offering me some of his lunch on multiple occasions, even though his family usually packed him fast food that he loved. I also remember seeing a poem he wrote. I don't think he wanted to share it, and I didn't fully intend to read it. I grew up in a house where you needed to know everything to avoid provoking danger, so I had an unfortunate habit of collecting intel wherever I went. Either way, the poem was basically about how he had a good heart even though he had a hard time being good. It breaks my heart to think of him. He had a lot of kindness in him, but since childhood, most adults in his life basically believe that he would become a criminal. It's a vicious world that sets people up for failure before they're born. My mom's family absolutely adored our local rabbi. He did all of our weddings, bar mitzvahs, and baby naming ceremonies. He came over for dinner with my grandparents often. He was in lots of our family photos and many of them were framed on our wall. His family lived right down the street from our home. His wife was sweet and was a role model for my mom and her sisters when they were young. Nobody ever detected anything wrong with them. He was a pillar in our community. Then one day his wife was found brutally murdered. She was beaten to death with a lead pipe right in the middle of their home. Everybody assumed it was a botched burglary or some random home break-in. Nobody suspected our rabbi, who had a full alibi anyway. My whole family went to the funeral and then back to their house after to sit shiva. Jews spend the whole week after somebody's death sitting in their home, comforting them and helping clean the house and prepare meals. Things started to seem strange as soon as they entered the house. The huge blood stain was still visible on their white carpet, and while everybody else seemed uncomfortable and tried to avoid that room she was killed in, he stepped right over the bloodied areas like it was nothing. He was immediately trying to give away her things to people, saying crap to the girls like you look like you're her size. Feel free to see if there's anything in her closet that you might want to take, and even asking men if they wanted to bring any of her old purses or kitchen appliances home for their wives. It just felt wrong. But they chalked it up to him being in shock. Soon we discovered that he had a girlfriend on the side and he wanted his wife dead so he could marry the mistress. He paid 2 of his synagogue's congregants. We knew one of them very well. He lived on our road and was the uncle of my mom's best friend, to commit the murder for him. And after setting up the date for her death, he went and got the side chick officially converted to Judaism so he could marry her as soon as possible once the wife was out of the picture. He's now in prison. All of us, with the exception of my grandfather's wife who still defends him and won't accept that he's guilty, now despise him. We took down all the family photos with him in it. His temple is now being run by all new people. Unfortunately, he's still in all of our family albums because he's at the center of most of our wedding bar mitzvah pics. Such a scumbag. We had no idea. Guy I went to high school with was super cool and pretty mild-mannered, shot 5 people, execution style, in a robbery a few years later. Saw him on the news and my mouth dropped. First year in high school we had PE together with other classes. One guy had some serious anger issues and would throw a fit over small things, such as losing in a friendly match. The guy accidentally killed his friend by knocking him into a bloody pulp and then leaving him face down in a creek to drown. He even went to the funeral. He comforted the mother and the family, and pretended to mourn his death. He didn't confess until almost 3 years after the murder. I was not surprised in the least that he would end up doing something like this. Sister's friend. They had stopped hanging out because the friend had changed school, murdered a fellow classmate and tried to hide the body. She seemed fine at like 12-14ish. I don't know if it was 8th grade or freshman year, but she started hanging out with the goth kids, which I know means nothing. She seemed to have a fake personality. You know the internet joke about bitchy resting face? This girl had more of an evil, plotting against you resting face. Well, there was some minor drugs use, some drinking, I think perhaps some fighting, and she was sent to an alternative school, thus not hanging out with my sister. I guess she was the cool kid there, being the new one, and sometime later came a new kid who everyone liked more. She couldn't stand being second, and having her fame popularity taken away, she invited the girl to lunch, strangled her in a Taco Bell parking lot, cut up the body with help from 2 friends, tried to burn the body, and then hid pieces of it. Somehow that only gets you 45 years in jail. One of the 2 guys got 45 years, and a third got 5 years on lesser charges, and with an odd twist of karma, he was released and later killed in a car crash. The first guy was my first real date. We went to see Dante's Peak. Years later, he stabbed a prostitute to death. The second guy liked to grab my butt and flirt with me like it was his job. He and his little brother, who I also knew, killed multiple people after drug deals gone bad. I believe that they are both in jail for life due to murder and drug charges. Thankfully, I started choosing much better people to date, hang around with. Guy that used to work with me shot a dude over drugs. He seemed like a nice kid. He was 19ish, I was 27, who was a little ghetto, but whatever. He was polite to all his co-workers and the customers. He also happened to live a few apartment buildings over from me, so sometimes I'd drive him to and from work. One night I got off really late, 2-3 am, and he was outside my building, and I remember he said, "Oh, there go Murizel, she cool. Don't frick with her," to whoever else was outside with him. I never got harassed outside my building after that. There was a shooting a few blocks over and I just had this gut feeling it was him. But I was at work when it occurred and my building wasn't anywhere near the building it happened in, so it's not like I could have called the cops and said, "So I saw on Facebook there was a shooting in my complex a few blocks away," while I was at work, and my spidey sense is telling me it was so and so. But it was a shame too, because he was really one of the better hoodlums I lived around. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve what he got, or that he was justified in his actions, but he could have done better with his life. I know two. One is the sister of a friend from high school. She murdered her newborn when she was 15 and is the reason for my state's safe haven law. I know her now, after her time in prison. I truly believe she was a lost, terrified teenager too scared to confront her Catholic family with a baby. She hid her pregnancy. She is a totally different person in adulthood. The second was a classmate. Went to school with him for 12 years. He was shy and quiet but always very laid back and friendly. He got high on every drug imaginable and murdered his parents with a homemade machete. It was brutal. Drugs are bad, kids. I had a high school class with someone who's in jail for a murder he committed a few years ago. We're still FB friends. I think he plea bargained down to second degree and got 20-ish years with opportunity for parole. He was honestly a nice guy, bit of a druggie, but definitely didn't see anything violent in him. He was always good to me. The girl he went to senior prom with is one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. It's amusing to look back on their very different life paths since. He just sort of fell into the wrong crowd after high school. The murder sounded like a confrontation over a drug deal. TLDR. Mentor friend former Bible school teacher invited me to her house one summer. Met her husband. Got bad vibes. He later murdered her because he didn't know how to just divorce her. Sucker. Around the time I started middle school, my family moved one state over. A woman from my parents' former church asked if I wanted to come back for a week and help with VBS. I liked kids. I missed my friends. I didn't particularly like my parents and she was kind of an amazing human being, so I said sure. I got to meet her baby, cutest freaking baby ever by the way, and her husband. Her husband was nice, cordial. The teacher and her mill were super positive, intelligent, witty, funny, and happy. So I remember thinking it was weird that he just seemed unhappy about everything. He perked up when they brought up the house they were building. He was sweet to his kiddo. I recently found a journal from that summer and came across a paragraph I wrote. Her husband kind of makes me feel freaked out. I don't know. He's fine, but his eyes don't have any light in them. It's kind of like a part of his soul is dead. He kind of walks around with this air of despair. Haha, that rhymes. Anyways, a year or two later he had an affair. Killed his wife. Tried to make it look like an accident. Went to prison. He gets out soon. It's a dang shame he's not going to be there longer. He robbed a lot of good kids, including their child, of a lot of love. All because he didn't know how to tell his wife he didn't want hers. I realized the other day I'm the same age she was when he killed her. I feel like my life just started. The whole thing just makes me freaking sad. How awful to lose a friend and how awful to rob children of a kind-hearted mother. I hope you trust your gut more now. You made such an important observation. This story really impacted me. One summer, my sister and I spent a week visiting my grandmother in Ohio. We were late elementary school age. My cousin, sister, and I would play in the backyard each day and the next door neighbor would come over. He was a few years older, which at that age meant he was quite a bit bigger and stronger, and something was just off with him. One day, I can't remember exactly how it happened, but he pinned me against the fence and wouldn't let go. Then his hand moved to my neck. I fought free with everything I had. My cousin and sister were shocked and we kinda laughed it off but would run inside the next few times he tried to play with us. Fast forward a few years and he killed his roommate at some kind of inpatient facility. LV worked with me at a now defunct variety store chain. He was a bag boy at the front lines. Met and dated another employee, Valerie. Seems that LV had a serious drug habit. One day he tried to take Valerie's supplemental assistance check to go buy drugs. She wouldn't give it to him, stating it was for her kids. He walked out to the car, got the tire jack, went inside, and beat Valerie and both her children to death. One child was 5 years old, and the other one was 9 months. He's on death row, and has been for many years. Eventually he'll meet his maker. Mike was one of my classmates in high school. Lost track of him after he moved away. He made national headlines in 1986 when he and a buddy had a huge shootout in Miami with the FBI, resulting in 2 agents dead and 5 wounded. Mike and his partner did not survive. I had a girl I was sweet on in school, and she was always dragging her younger brother around with her as kind of a chaperone. Kind of made dating a hassle, but she was worth it. Some years later I read in the paper that little brother killed his college roommate in order to steal his Volvo. Who kills a guy for a Volvo, I ask you? Doing life in prison with a possibility of parole, but so far he's still there. D. Across the street from me was a nice newlywed couple and their son, Simon. Hard-working folks, but their son was destined to be an only child. They moved away when he was about 10, and then in 2001 Simon, who was now 20, was arrested for the strangulation of a high school classmate. The really crappy thing about this is that Simon's dad and the victim's dad both worked at the same company and had known each other for years. They did not know about the murder until over a year later, when Simon bragged to someone about the crime. Girl's dad thought the girl had run away and had spent thousands searching for her, now serving life without parole, and although I didn't talk about him, there was a co-conspirator who also got life. Second crappy note, the person he bragged to was the mom of the co-conspirator, with whom he had a physical relationship, who turned them both in. Justice, right? Frankie was a drinking buddy. He told me that Jimmy was pee him off, and he deserved to die. I thought nothing of it, of course it was the beer talking. 1 week later Frankie was in jail, and Jimmy was dead. Served 16 years. Jesus, where do you live? Your schoolmates, your neighbor, your coworker. Had a client who was always really weird and could just tell he was off. He worked with handicapped kids as a chauffeur type of person. He had a heart attack and was even weirder after that episode, to the point that we would sarcastically make remarks about how there must be bodies in his home. One morning I read an alert of Facebook. I think I killed my son. The father told 911. His wife was leaving him, and he decided that since he can't afford to live on his own, he would murder their 4-year-old. He even told the courts that he knew killing a child would guarantee him life in prison, so he knew he would be fed and have a bed forever. He admitted that he knew he could not take the 12-year-old, as he was heavy and in awful shape, and that the mom would let him take the newborn that day, or he would have done it to them all, just to get to the mom. He is now in the system, awaiting a final trial because his lawyer keeps postponing, saying he won't get a fair trial locally. A young man who used to come over to play D&D and do other nerdly things with our friends group. He came over one evening and showed us with great pride the tattoo he'd just gotten with his baby daughter's name in it. We were happy. He'd had a rough life, brain tumor as a child, really rough family situation in his teens, slightly mentally impaired, etc., and thought he was finally getting better, going to be okay. The same night, he went back to the house he and his GF and baby were living in with the girl's mom, and apparently, during breaks taken from playing WoW, he assaulted the mother with a knife, a ballpoint pen, and a frying pan. The girlfriend escaped down the road to the fire station and told them everything. Cops got there as he was wrapping up the corpse with the shower curtain. He's doing something like 36 years hard on a life sentence in Florida now. He was a good kid. Bit messed up, but you know, not any worse than anyone else, really. Soft spoken, polite, really wanted to be just one of the guys, and it frustrated him no end when he didn't get something, like how to add or figure fact 0 or something, but we all helped him with that. It's been nearly 10 years now and it's still inexplicable to me how that kid did that thing. Honestly, it is. I knew a guy until he moved away when we were about 12. He was always really polite and friendly to me. He would come around and we'd just play video games. He had a bad reputation with everyone else though, as I found out a bit later. We had separate friends at school. He's in prison along with another guy for beating someone to death. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.